New England's deadliest conflict. King Philip's War, untold truths. A severed head, displayed on a pole at the entrance to Plymouth Colony. Blood still dripping from the neck. Flies gathering around the lifeless eyes. This wasn't just any trophy of war. This was Metacom, known to the English as King Philip. The man who had nearly brought the entire New England colonies to their knees. With the death of King Philip, and the severing of his head, brought to Plymouth as a warning to all others that they were in control, the brutal display remained there for 25 years. A quarter-century reminder of what happens to those who resist. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories to uncover the truth behind America's forgotten conflicts. How did a powerful Native leader go from commanding thousands of warriors across 6 tribes to becoming a gruesome colonial trophy? And more importantly, how did a conflict that killed 30% of the English colonial population and devastated 90% of the Native Americans in southern New England get erased from our common history? Long before Metacom's head became a colonial trophy, the stage 4 conflict had been meticulously set, not through a single dramatic event, but through a century of silent devastation and cultural collision. The numbers tell a story more horrific than any battlefield. Native villages once bustling with life stood empty. Hunting grounds once teeming with hunters fell silent. Fishing spots passed down through generations lay abandoned. Bodies piled up not from arrows or bullets, but from invisible killers that arrived with the first European ships. Our people die like leaves falling from trees during the first frost, recounted a Wampanoag elder, whose name is lost to history. We bury our children, our parents, our brothers and sisters, our medicine men pray, but their prayers return unanswered. The impact was catastrophic. In just 100 years preceding King Philip's War, up to 90% of the native population had been wiped out by European diseases, smallpox, measles, influenza, ailments for which they had no immunity and no defense. Where once stood powerful nations of thousands, now remained mere shadows of communities, weakened not only in numbers, but in their ability to resist what was coming. As native numbers dwindled, English settlements multiplied. The Plymouth colony, established in 1620, had expanded to dozens of settlements by 1675. English farms pushed further inland each year, encroaching on hunting grounds and agricultural lands that had sustained native communities for thousands of years. Governor Josiah Winslow of Plymouth Colony surveyed the expanding territories with satisfaction. God has cleared the lands for our inheritance, he proclaimed to his council in 673. Where the savages once roamed, now stand proper English towns and fields, as the Lord intended. His words reflected a growing colonial attitude that the decimation of native populations was divine providence, clearing the way for English settlement. This philosophy fueled what native leaders came to call the unquenchable hunger of the English for land. By 1675, the strategic coexistence between English settlers and the native population in New England had been stretched to its breaking point. The unyielding English land hunger pressed against increasingly desperate native communities fighting for survival, but the conflict ran deeper than competition. For physical space, it was a fundamental collision of worldviews about the very nature of land itself. Captain Thomas Church, who would later become a key military leader against Metacom, recorded a conversation with a Wampanoag in Oxford. He told me that land cannot be owned, any more than the wind or the stars. They believe they can use it, live from it, but not possess it forever as we claim to do. The English concept of land ownership, individual, is just another way of making native people the severed head that once served as a transformed into something else entirely, a symbol of historical reckoning. The true power of this story lies not in who ultimately claimed victory, but in our willingness to confront its often uncomfortable truths, the blood-soaked soil of New England. holds memories that many would prefer to permanent, forget. Exclusive. But buried truths don't disappear. They wait, demanding recognition. This deadly collision between worlds arose from specific choices, misunderstandings and human failings on both sides. Understanding King Philip's War matters, not because it confirms comfortable national myths, but precisely because it challenges them. History, at its most powerful, doesn't merely recite facts, documented on paper. It transforms how we see ourselves and the society we've built. Subscribe to Native Legends and History Stories for unflinching explorations of America's hidden past. Because only by confronting our complete history, not just the chapters that flatter us, can we hope to build a future worthy of all who call this land home, was utterly foreign who viewed land through a lens of seasonal use, communal rights and spiritual connection. Native communities typically moved their settlements every 3 to 4 years, allowing the land to recover, a practice incomprehensible to English sensibilities of permanent occupation. The Wampanoag didn't understand that. They were signing away permanent deeds to land, wrote colonial administrator William Bradford in his private journals, what they thought was permission to use. We recorded as transfer of ownership in perpetuity. This misunderstanding wasn't merely conceptual. It had practical exploited by colonial authorities. John Easton documented in his account that native leaders accused English representatives deliberately intoxicating during land negotiations, causing them to sign away far more territory than they realized. They make our chiefs drink the strong water until their minds swim like fish in troubled waters, complained one Pocahontas warrior to a Dutch trader in 671, when they can barely stand. Papers are brought forth for marking. The next morning, we discover another hunting ground is gone forever. The colonial legal system further entrenched these inequities. Native leaders found themselves entangled in English courts where proceedings were conducted in a foreign language, operating on foreign principles. Debts accumulated often through dubious means became justification for further land seizures. When Metacom, known to the English as King Philip, became Sachem of the Wampanoag after his brother's suspicious death in 1662, he inherited not only leadership, but mounting grievances. The son of Matt, who at once aided the struggling pilgrims during their first winter, now faced a colony that had grown powerful at his people's expense. My father was the first to welcome the English. Metacom reportedly told English officials during a tense 1671 meeting in Taunton. He gave them corn when they were starving. He gave them land when they had none. How have you repaid his kindness? By taking more, always more. Religious tensions further inflame the situation. Missionary efforts led by figures like John Eliot established praying towns, where native converts lived under strict Christian governance, separated from their traditional practices and communities by 1675. Approximately 1,100 praying Indians lived, creating divisions and resentment among traditional leaders, who saw these conversions as further the erosion of their authority and culture. The English colonial government increasingly treated and other native leaders not as sovereign authorities, but as subjects to be controlled. In 1671, Plymouth colony forced Metacom to surrender native and sign a humiliating treaty, acknowledging submission to English authority, a document he likely never fully understood. Due to language barriers, the stage was set for a decimated population, shrinking cultural misunderstandings, legal manipulation, and growing resentment on both sides. As one English minister wrote ominously in 1674, the savages grow more discontented by the day, and whispers of rebellion reach our ears. From the forests we pray for peace, but prepare for war as prudence dictates. Little did he know that within months, New England would erupt into the deadliest conflict per capita in American history, the severed head on a pike. At Plymouth Colony's entrance was still attached to a living, breathing leader who was about to shake the very foundations of English colonial ambition. The tension that had been building for decades finally ignited in a small settlement on the edge of colonial territory. Swansea, Massachusetts, June 1st, 775. The fuse of what would become America's deadliest conflict per capita was lit, not with a formal declaration, but with a series of escalating incidents that quickly spiraled beyond anyone's control. A band of Wampanoag warriors moved silently through the fields surrounding Swansea, fields that had belonged to their ancestors. Their faces painted for war, they targeted not military positions, but civilian homes, breaking into barns, raiding storage sheds, and taking food supplies. These weren't random acts. Each raid targeted properties built on disputed land. They came not as an army, but as thieves in the night, wrote Reverend William Hubbard, a contemporary chronicler, taking what they believed rightfully theirs. Whether Metacom ordered these raids remains disputed. Some historical accounts suggest these warriors acted without his explicit approval, a faction of young men too eager for confrontation to wait for their Sam's command. The raids continued for 3 days, with increasing boldness. On the third day, a 17-year-old English colonist named John Salisbury spotted a warrior carrying off supplies from his family's barn, armed with his father's musket. Salisbury took aim. The single shot echoed across the settlement. The warrior fell, blood spreading across his chest. He became the first documented casualty in what would soon bear the name King Philip's War. Word of the killing spread quickly. The response was swift and calculated. 24 hours later, 9 English colonists lay dead in Swansea, their bodies left in full view along the main road leading into town. The message was clear: blood would be repaid with blood. They did not merely kill, reported colonial. They arranged the bodies as warnings, some with hands folded in mock prayer, others with their Bibles placed open on their chests. They meant to send a message beyond the killing. Colonial authorities immediately dispatched militia units from Plymouth, Massachusetts Bay, and Connecticut colonies. 3 separate forces converged on Mount Hope Peninsula, where intelligence suggested Metacom had established his base camp. The colonial strategy was straightforward: surround the peninsula trap and crush the rebellion before it could spread. But Metacom had anticipated this response. The English think us simple children, he reportedly told his council of war. They believe we will wait here like deer surrounded by wolves. We will show them the Wampanoag are foxes, not deer. While colonial forces marched Mount Hope, Metacom had executed a brilliant tactical under cover of darkness. He moved his fighters, along with women and children, off the exposed peninsula and into the vast Pocasset swamp in what is now Tiverton, Rhode Island. The dense, nearly impenetrable wetland provided natural protection against colonial forces unfamiliar with its treacherous terrain. When English troops arrived at Mount Hope, they found abandoned wigwams and cold fire pits. Metacom had vanished, with approximately 300 warriors and their families. The colonial forces, lacking both supplies for extended operations and knowledge of swamp warfare, could only establish defensive positions around the perimeter of the wetlands. Major William Bradford, son of the former Plymouth governor, surveyed the swamp's edge with visible frustration. "We have come hunting savages," he wrote in his dispatch, "only to find ourselves staring at an ocean of mud and twisted trees that seems to swallow our scouts whole."